I'm tying up another Carrie Stevens streamer. This is the Canary. It's just a basic yellow streamer that she did. I took the opportunity with this one to do a supplemental tying video on how these wings are constructed. I mentioned in a number of videos that I construct the wings ahead of time, so when I'm actually tying the fly, it's easy just to put them right up there and tie it in. And look for that video. It's actually was published a couple of days before this one, so that you can see that beforehand. But like I said, it's a pretty straightforward fly. A couple of things I'm going to mention in the video that I've also learned in terms of about the throat and how the heads are done on a lot of Carrie Stevens streamers. Like I said, this is just a simple, straightforward, kind of basic Carrie Stevens pattern. That is the Canary, some barbs that are stuck together there. I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Canary with my hook on the vise. This is a Partridge CS15 in a size 2. I'm going to go ahead and debarb the hook. I'm going to attach my thread. To begin with, I'm using a thread of 140 Denier Wapsi UTC Ultra thread in black. I'm going to attach my thread maybe about 2/3 down the hook shank and advance just a little bit down. This is where I'm going to tie in the tag on this. The tag is just a silver tinsel. I'm using a Danville Mylar silver and gold tinsel in size 10. Tie that in with the gold side up. Advance my thread about a half a dozen turns down the hook shank. Then I'm going to apply this for my tag. Get 4 or 5 turns down the hook shank past the point of the hook, and then I'll bring it back up. Now, I'm not certain in terms of these Carrie Stevens patterns, because I've seen different ones and or the same pattern tied by different people and set up a little bit different. This is like some of the other patterns that I've done, in that it's just a silver tinsel body. There is a black tail we're going to put in. But I've seen some where the tag back here is all the way down to just past the barb. So more or less in that space right from the point of the hook to the barb. But I've also seen on a number of patterns where the tag never gets back past the point of the hook. So I'm not certain, still which it is. This is just the way that I'm tying it right at the moment. With the tail is a black hackle, and I'm going to use some Schlappen for this. I have some nice long Schlappen here, and I'm going to get a little bit off one side, get those tips even, peel that off, and then get a little bit from the other side, like that. Peel that off, and then match those up. I'm going to get all that together. I want to tie that in so that the tail sticks out maybe 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch past the bend. That's pretty much the length of the overall fly, so we don't want to go beyond that. I don't think you have to get a ruler out to make certain it's perfect. Few wraps in to secure that. I'm going to trim the butt ends of these, but I'm going to trim these at an angle. And the reason is I want to try and taper that down so I don't get too much of a bump back here. And advance my thread forward. I am going to flatten the thread at this point. This simply allows me to cover more space on the hook a little bit quicker with a flatter thread. The body, as I mentioned, is a flat silver tinsel. We're going to put in a double layer. You could put in a single layer if you want and attach it back by the tail and then advance it forward. The issue with the single layer is that unless you get every wrap just touching really nice and neat to the previous one, you're going to end up with some black lines in those gaps. With doing a double layer, it gives you two advantages. One, any of those gaps in the first layer get covered up by the second layer. If there's any gaps in the second layer, you've got silver, already have a layer of silver down. And two, it also smooths it out just a little bit more. So I'm going to have my thread at least 2 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. Remember, this is pretty much going to be our head space. So I'm going to tie the body in here. I'll put my underbelly in and my throat and my wing all right in this space right here so that I have that nice long head up front. I'm going to get at least about 12 to 13 inches of tinsel. I want to take the end of that tinsel and I want to cut it at a nice fine angle. I'm going to cut it at a nice abrupt angle like that because then I can tie in with the silver side up just the very tip of that tinsel. And that will bind in that tinsel and I can start to apply that. Before I do that, I'm going to put some head cement along the thread wraps here. That head cement's just going to help that tinsel to hold on to the hook a little bit better. Makes the fly last a little bit longer. So the only downside with this mylar tinsel is that if you let go of it while you're tying it, it all unravels, or if it gets cut in the process of fishing, it's all going to start to unravel. As you can see, you get a nice smooth body along with no gaps along that. You're going to have a bump back here. I don't know if there's a way to work around that simply because of the materials. If you had some real long tail fibers, that went the length of the hook, Some bucktail would be nice in there, but otherwise there isn't any. And you're going to end up with that bump back there. All right, so now I'm going to put in my underbelly, and the underbelly is some yellow bucktail. You do this a couple of ways. First off, I'll give you a little tip here. There's hair all the way from the base of the bucktail right here, all the way up to the tip. The issue is that this hair down here is different than this hair up here. This hair off the tip right here, or even about halfway up and up to the tip, it's thinner. It has less air pockets in it. It doesn't compress as easy, so therefore it doesn't flare as much. Whereas the hairs down here, they're thicker at the base, they're spongier, they have more air pockets, if that's a word. Anyway, when you tie these in and tend to try to really tie in the butt ends, they flare much more. So you want to get the hair either from around the tip here or just down below it a little bit. I'm going to get a clump of hair that is longer than I need in terms of the length here, but it also is a little bit thicker because I have to get this under fur out right here, or the short fibers, I should say. At the tip here, you don't get a whole lot of under fur. You mostly just get short fibers. Because all we really want are these real long fibers here. So I've got about the right density here, but I want to try and even this up a little bit. You can do that a couple of ways. You could put it in a hair stacker if you want. I don't like to because I think it comes out almost too clean. What I'm going to do is reach up here and just pull some of these shorter fibers out to the end to try and get all of these more or less the same length. If some of them are too curly or too kinky or whatever, just take them out, or even too short. Just go ahead and take those out. I've got some in here that are just too short for what I need. Just take those out, but you can take a few of these and just pull them out to the length of the overall tail, just to try and even that up a little bit. I actually prefer a more natural taper to this. Something like that. I take this long one out. Got a couple of small ones here I can pull out. A couple right here. You just go ahead and work it for a while. You can even take these out like this and then put them back in. So you more or less just kind of get those even by hand. You're going to want to tie that underbelly in so the length is just the same as the tail. So I bring this up underneath the hook shank, pinch and loop from underneath, and tie that in. You don't want that to twist with the torque of the thread or anything and come around the actual hook shank. You want it to stay nice and on the bottom. I'm going to cut this at a little bit of an angle, like this. It's just going to give me more of a tapered area underneath the head there. Secure those down, and I'll get in my throat. And the interesting thing is, in the past, I've done some of these videos of the Carrie Stevens flies and tying in a throat. I've just taken a single clump, kind of like you would a regular wet fly, put it up underneath. I tie it usually so it goes about halfway down the hook shank. And that's it. What I've come to find out is that she actually would tie in 3 and sometimes 4 clumps around here. There would be one underneath like this, and then there's going to be one on the side here and the side here. This is her way of covering up the hook shank right here, so that then when the wing goes on, you don't see any of this black thread or anything. And even sometimes she would have a clump of throat material up on the top here to aid in, I think, the positioning of the wings. Still researching that and looking into it a little bit, and making certain that this is indeed the way she did her throats. But recently I just kind of discovered that. The throat, by the way, is I'm just using some yellow Schlappen. It just calls for yellow hackle. So I'll get my first clump in underneath. I want to make certain I'm not getting too many thread wraps in here because I don't want that to get too bulky. You could actually even switch out your thread to, say, a 70 denier at this point if you wanted to. Try and mitigate some of that. I'm going to take another clump, and I'm doing this just like I did the tail. I take a little bit of Schlappen barbs from one side of the feather and then match it up with the other side. Not exactly certain of the reasoning for this. As I said, what I had read was something about covering up the hook shank, but the thing is, if you look at this, you're still going to have thread wraps showing as you tie this in, and then as we tie in the wing. The only thing I can think of is that you've got barbs on this side of the hook shank here, so it helps to kind of hide that end of the hook shank. Again, I'm still kind of researching some of this, trying to learn this and figure out just how she did things. Got one bucktail here that's kind of going wild there on me. And even trying to cut those at a bit of an angle so I kind of keep that taper. Lash those down. And at this point, I'm going to change my thread over to an orange thread. There is a orange band in this. And what I've also since discovered is that now I'm flattening my thread to put in a whip finish here just to keep it smooth. A lot of her flies have a red or orange band or some sort of banding in the head. And one of the conundrums I've run across in doing these in the past, like many people, I just assumed she finished the head in black thread and then would put a red band or a orange band of thread on top of it. Problem with that is that the black thread underneath will darken that band. And what I have since learned from the Hilliard book is that she would actually use the red or orange as the base when she's tying in the wing, and then afterward reattach the black to put the two black bands in there. So I'm using a Danville 6/0 in orange. This is actually kind of a fluorescent orange, so it's kind of pretty bright. I'm going to attach my thread just behind the eye of the hook. Going to get a base layer of this orange down before I tie in the wings. I don't get too concerned about making it like a complete base layer, but what I am wanting to do also is to smooth that whole area out so that the wings have a nice flat broad area to be tied in. The wings on these, as I mentioned in the beginning, I've already pre-made these, and I did this in a supplemental video and actually showed how these wings were made. These are the ones from that video. I've got these matched up here. I'm going to trim away most of the excess of the rachis right here for all of those, just to get a little nub there. And I've also found out that she ties these in one at a time, as opposed to how I've done it in other videos where I tie them together. And the reason for that is that she doesn't tie these so that they're parallel to the shank of the hook. They're actually cocked up just a little bit. Now this may be also where that little extra bit of throat material tied up on top comes into play. That I do not know. This, as you can see, is not flat on this side. It's cocked that way. And part of that is because of the way it's tied in. It is kind of on the top, but on my side. What I have found is that I need to bring these down a little bit more onto my side. Let that thread tension kind of bring them up. And then I get this flatter on this side here. And there again, see, there's this space right here. So she may be tying in some throat material up here just to cover and fill in that space. I don't know. I will find out though. Then we're going to take the other wing. I want to make certain the tips are even on these. That's probably the most important thing here. I'm going to place that on the other side, wrapping that in. And then take a look and see how it's sitting. I got my tips even. It's setting well. See how all the throat hackles here are kind of covering up that hook shank right there. And on this side here, you don't see any bare hook shank or any tinsel. So I think that's the reasoning for all of that. And again, there's a gap right here. So there might be some put in there just to kind of fill that in. Okay, I'm going to go with that. And now I'm going to go back and forth to smooth the head area out. And here I'm trying to take care to get my wraps right next to each other. I want to smooth the whole head out here and get a nice layer of orange down on top of any of that black that I had down before. Once I get that pretty much covered and looking pretty good, remember that's going to get covered up by a black band here, but we'll put a little bit more on there. I'm going to flatten my thread and get about a 9 or 10 turn whip finish in here. Smooth that off a little bit, and then I'll reattach some 6/0 black thread so that I don't build up too much, and get the 2 black bands in. Actually, about 12 turns. All right. So I'm using a 6/0 Danville in black for this. And as I said, I'm just going to cover up. I'm going to start in the back here. This is simply to cover up the orange in the black and in the front. And it's my understanding you want to divide this into thirds. So I'm going to have a black band in the back that is about a third the length of the head, and then one in the front that is about a third the length of the head. And then that's going to end up with a orange band in the middle that is also about a third. Take your time with this. Make certain you're getting any orange in that black area covered up. Again, I'm going to flatten my thread. This just helps to keep it smooth. I'm not certain if on the heads of her flies, see there's a little bit more bulk right here in the middle of it, and I'm not certain if that's just the design or the nature of it, or if what you're aiming for is something a little more tapered from the back all the way up to the front. Again, there's a lot to learn here, a lot to discover. I'll reattach my thread right behind the eye of the hook, start advancing that backwards. Make certain I'm getting any orange covered up. Again, we'll flatten that thread. I'm going to put some head cement on this just to soak down into those thread wraps to kind of hold that together a little bit better. And then I'm going to come back and put a coat of clear lacquer on it. She coated all of her flies with some clear lacquer. And again, I don't know if that is some sort of finish lacquer or if it's a adhesive lacquer or what lacquer that was that she used to finish off the flies. But that's what I'm going to do. It's going to seal it up and it's going to give it a little bit of just a little bit of a sheen to it. I've got one little spot back here. I think that's when I did the whip finish. Just kind of went out. Not going to be concerned with it. This is going to be more of a fishing fly. See, I'm kind of still wondering about that, having some of that yellow hackle up here. I think it just fills it up a little bit more. But I shall endeavor to find that out. So that's the Canary. Another nice Carrie Stevens pattern, all yellow, so you can see why it's kind of named the Canary. I shall continue my journey on finding out how she actually tied these and passing that along. That's the Canary. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining me at Devise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.